Hello, this is Mr. Laudermith, and I welcome you to AP Biology this year. Many of the lectures this year in AP Bio that would traditionally be given in class will actually be done in video form. That means you'll want to take good notes on the videos assigned, and the technique that we're requesting you to use is called Cornell notes. And the purpose of this video is to go over what needs to be in your Cornell notes, the best way to take Cornell notes. Now, at this point, some of you might be asking yourselves, why are we going to bother with these Cornell notes at all? Couldn't Mr. Laudermith, or if your teacher is Mrs. Bible, couldn't Mrs. Bible just give us an outline or a handout with all the notes that we need? Or some of you might also be saying, well, I'll just read the book really carefully, or these videos you're talking about, I'll just watch them a whole bunch of times and then I'll remember everything. Well, while I think watching these videos more than once and reading the book are important, and while I certainly could give you a handout with all the notes, I don't think that's the best strategy for you, especially when it comes to preparing for quizzes and tests. I'll shoot a quick statistic at you. According to research, the typical individual, the typical student, forgets 2/3 of what they've learned within 2 weeks of a lecture. However, if they take notes during the lecture and review those notes on a regular basis, they can retain up to 90% of what they've learned even a year later. That's why I think these Cornell notes are important, because they're going to help you to remember the key information we're asking you to learn and keep it with you when you need to recall it most. So these notes are going to help to keep you organized, and you'll be able to revise and review them later. They'll help you focus on the key concepts we're learning, as well as vocabulary terms, processes, diagrams, and connections between topics. This is a flexible system, can be used with videos, but also if I assign you a portion of the textbook to read, or even if I'm having you do something in a group activity where I want you to take notes about your discussion in the group, we can use this technique. And if you so choose, you can use your Cornell notes as an aid while you're taking unit tests. So, to begin Cornell notes, we follow what's known as the STAR system, with S standing for setup. Now, in the unit packets I'll be handing out, there will be template sheets for you to do Cornell notes on, but if you find that you need more or you lose your packet, you can always download these template sheets from the course docs page at my website, www.laudermith.com. There's a basic note sheet that's lined. There's also one that's completely blank, very good if you're going to do, for instance, concept mapping. There's one that even has grids for graphing on it, because in some cases the notes might involve drawing graphs, and that could be useful. You can also use any old piece of paper if you just follow the guide that's on this page. You need to make sure that your Cornell note sheet has what's called a Q column on the left, an area on the right for taking notes, and an area at the bottom for writing a summary. So the T stands for take notes. So let's start with that left-hand Q column. What should you be writing there? Well, first of all, questions. What are you still unclear about after watching the video, reading the book, listening to a lecture? What do you want to know more about? What questions might you see showing up on a quiz or a test? It's always good to anticipate what you think your teacher might ask you about. What are the important vocabulary terms? You might want to write down references to pages in the textbook, or to labs we've done, or other assignments or activities we've done in class. You'll also want to write some notes to yourself about things you need to do in order to better understand a topic. Now for our example, we're going to watch just part of a video that I'll assign later on this year called the 5 Fingers of Evolution. We'll start by watching about the first minute and a half.
The 5 Fingers of Evolution. A thorough understanding of biology requires a thorough understanding of the process of evolution. Most people are familiar with the process of natural selection. However, this is just one of 5 processes that can result in evolution. Before we discuss all 5 of these processes, we should define evolution. Evolution is simply change in the gene pool over time. But what is a gene pool? And, for that matter, what is a gene? Before spending any more time on genetics, let us begin with a story. Imagine that a boat capsizes and 10 survivors swim to shore on a deserted island. They are never rescued, and they form a new population that exists for thousands of years. Strangely enough, 5 of the survivors have red hair. Red hair is created when a person inherits 2 copies of the red gene from their parents. If you only have 1 copy of the gene, you won't have red hair. To make this easier, we will assume that the 5 non-redheads are not carriers of the gene. The initial frequency of the red hair gene is therefore 50%, or 10 of 20 total genes. These genes are the gene pool. The 20 different genes are like cards in a deck that keep getting reshuffled with each new generation.
All right, I'm going to stop right there. While I was watching this video on my template sheet, I was taking some Cornell notes. So let's take a look at what I've written so far. So at the top, I, of course, put my name, my class period, the date, the topic or objective for this particular sheet of notes, which your teacher would typically give you, along with the essential question, which in this case is just, what are the 5 fingers of evolution? Well, as I was watching the video, one of the first important things I heard was that there are 5 processes of evolution. So in the left-hand column, I put that as a question. What are the 5 processes of evolution? You'll notice I haven't answered that yet because I haven't gotten all the way through the video yet. I want to save some room, though, so that I can answer that question later. Now, one of the important terms that got defined early on was evolution. And that was defined as change in the gene pool over time. So I put the word on the left and I put its definition on the right. Gene pool also sounded like it was important, so I wrote that in the left column. And based on what I just heard, it sounds like to me that a gene pool is the total number of each type of gene in a population. So redhead versus not redhead. But maybe I'm not entirely sure about that. Well, I can write a note to myself, check with Mr. L. So the next day in class, I could go ask my teacher, hey, this is what I think a gene pool is based on the video. Is that what you think a gene pool is, or should I change my definition? And if I need to revise it, I go ahead and I change it right on my note sheet. So that's what we've got so far. Let's talk about some tips for taking notes in that right-hand section. You'll want to make sure you write in your own words. Paraphrase as much as you can. That way it's understandable to you. You're free to use abbreviations or symbols so long as they make sense to you. Of course, you can draw any figures or diagrams you want. I'm going to be doing some of that myself in a little bit. Like I said, if you write questions on the left, you might want to leave space on the right so that you can fill them in later. Bullets, arrows, underlining, highlighting, even using different colors, I'll be doing some of that in a moment, can all make your notes more useful to you. You'll want to write legibly. And this is the biggie, when you're taking notes, you don't write down every single word. That video would be posted on the class website, and you could watch it whenever and how often you want it. So there's no reason in these notes to write down every single word verbatim. You want to look at the most important concepts and write down what seems important to you, especially if something gets repeated many times in a video. That's probably really important. Or on the other hand, maybe it's only repeated once, but it's something that seems difficult to understand. That could be something that's important to write down and ask about later. Your Cornell notes will probably be different than everybody else in your class, and that is totally fine. I'm going to watch a little bit more of the video now, about another 1.5 to 2 minutes. I'm going to jump ahead though, and then I'll show you again what I wrote down in my Cornell notes. So give me a moment to jump ahead.
To remember these processes, we will use the fingers on your hand, starting from the little finger and moving to the thumb. The little finger should remind you that the population can shrink. If the population shrinks, then chance can take over. For example, if only 4 individuals survive an epidemic, then their genes will represent the new gene pool. The next finger is the ring finger. This finger should remind you of mating because a ring represents a couple. If individuals choose a mate based on their appearance or location, the frequency may change. If red-headed individuals only mate with red-headed individuals, they could eventually form a new population. If no one ever mates with red-headed individuals, these genes could decrease. The next finger is the middle finger. The M in the middle finger should remind you of the M in the word mutation. If a new gene is added through mutation, it can affect the frequency. Imagine a gene mutation creates a new color of hair. This would obviously change the frequency in the gene pool. The pointer finger should remind you of movement. If new individuals flow into an area.
All right, so I'm going to stop right there. And you can see that I've gone and added to my Cornell notes that I had previously started. So the little finger was the first of the 5 that got talked about, and the little finger means a shrinking population. And they mentioned that this is when chance takes over. Seems important, so I wrote it down. The ring finger has to do with mating. So the example they gave was that redheads would only mate with other redheads. That seemed important to write down. I put down some of my own questions. They keep talking about couples in this video. I was curious, do these 5 fingers also work for asexual reproduction? Could we use this to describe evolution of bacteria? Might be something I want to ask my teacher. As we were going through this idea of certain individuals mating with others reminded me something of a lab that we had done in class, and this is a lab we will do in class, called the Strawfish Lab. So I made a note of that because I saw a connection there with something else that we had done in class. Now at the top here, remember originally this was blank because I didn't know what the 5 processes were. I went and made myself a little sketch of a hand. Yes, I know that's a terrible looking hand, but as you'll learn as the year goes on, if you're in my class, my drawings only get worse. And I started labeling them. So the little finger for small population, the ring finger for a choosy mating, the middle finger for mutation, and I went ahead and finished the video and I labeled the other 2 as well. Now you might be wondering, what if I get to the bottom of my first sheet and I've run out of room? Well then, you get yourself another note sheet and you keep going. So the middle finger stood for mutation, for example, a new gene for hair color. And I had a question about this because we haven't yet studied molecular genetics in class. How can a new gene just appear in the population? Might be a question worth bringing up the next day in class. So hopefully you've gotten a good idea about how Cornell notes work. The A in the STAR system stands for actively listening, reading, analyzing, and asking questions. These notes have to be an interactive process. The R stands for review, revise, and reflect. And that starts as soon as you finish writing your notes because at the bottom of the sheet there's a section for a summary. Your summary should be no more than 2 sentences. So let me show you the summary that I wrote after watching the entire video. I said, the 5 fingers are the 5 ways the percent of different genes in a population can change over time. All 5 fingers cause evolution, but only natural selection results in adaptation. To me, that seemed like the key central concept of this particular video. I could share that in class, I could talk about it with other students or my teacher. Maybe they got a different message from the video that's worth talking about. Within 24 hours of writing my notes, I want to make sure I review them so that I'm retaining all that important information. Based on asking questions in class or other activities we do, I might want to go back and revise things in my notes that I was mistaken about or expand on things that I wrote just a little bit about before. When I'm all done, I can ask myself, do I understand this topic well enough to explain it to another student or explain it on a test? And if the answer is yes, then you've done a good job with your Cornell notes and you're ready to go on to the next topic. I hope you found this information useful and you'll be practicing it regularly as the year goes on. Thanks, I'll see you in class.